So welcome everyone. My name is Sonia Stojanovic-Gajic, and I'll be your host today for the panel on think tanks and partnerships for democratic security. Very happy to be with you today since most of my professional activist career, this is the topic I dedicated to. And I'm very happy to host this group of incredible women and men who have also dedicated their career to this topic in different parts of the world. So today with us, I've picked people that inspire me because of their organizational work, but also people that work in quite difficult contexts, and to be able to analyze why partnerships matter and what are the challenges with partnerships when you want to use them to support the work on overseeing police services, militaries, intelligence services, and generally contribute to the citizen-oriented security. So with us is Veronica Zubilaga. I hope I pronounced properly her name. Based in Caracas, Venezuela. She is double-headed. She's director of REACIN, a think tank focusing on urban safety, reduction of violence, fighting crime in Venezuela. But she's also an academic, a professor, and someone who, in the better times of her country, had experience of cooperating with government as a member of Presidential Commission on Gun Control. So welcome, Veronica.
Hi, I'm so excited and happy to be here with you in this conference. So yes, hi from Caracas.
I'll just finish the round of introductions and then we'll start the discussion. Melina is joining us from Brazil, from Igarape, one of the most influential security think tanks, not just in Brazil, but I would say in the world, and an organization whose name actually is all about connections and partnerships. I love the story from your website, which says Igarape is a word in a language of one of the nations in Amazon, if I understood right, describing the little springs and that connect the big rivers. So my understanding is that you see your mission as connecting the different parts of society to work on public safety issues, digital security, and environmental security. And Melina, you are leading a research team within Igarape, right?
Yes, that's right.
Great.
Yes, that's right. Thank you for the invitation, Sonia. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great. And I hope you will help us understand also how you manage partnerships in another country which is not famous for the quality of democracy, and your organization's influence is also visible for by the example that actually the president of your country has attacked both the organization and leadership a couple of times. Sean Tate is joining us from South Africa, I hope. That's where African Civilian Oversight Policing Forum is based on, and I'm sure I missed the name of the organization, but it is similar to Resdal that Marcela is representing today, transnational network made of professionals dealing with oversight of policing in Africa, including both officials from government oversight bodies and academics and civil society organizations. So by the design, it's an organization that practices partnerships within it, and we will also discuss how it does partnerships outside of the network with important stakeholders for this topic. And last but not the least, as I mentioned, Marcel has been Secretary General of Resdal, a Latin American network focusing on security and defense, most famous for its defense atlas or comparative research of all the militaries in Latin America. And for all of us who know anything about Latin America, we know that some security actors are more important than other for the politics of this part of the world. So how civil society has worked with militaries, established trust, and overseen their work. That's what Marcela is going to contribute with. And hopefully we'll have also surprise Marcela discussing some of the global work they're doing. Okay. So welcome everyone. I'll ask also others present if you want to maybe introduce yourself in a chat and maybe already ask a question or a comment. And the way we've envisaged this discussion is to ask the same questions to all the speakers, but to go one by one so that you hear each case in more depth, but only in 10 minutes since we have 4 speakers. And I want also audience to have a chance to ask questions. So I'll start with Veronica. Your organization gathers mostly people with academic background, teaching at university, involving with students. So how is it for academics to go to the field and work on sensitive issues such as violence, crime, police brutality, and what kind of partnerships do you need to do your work in a context of Venezuela today?
Yes, thank you. So, REACIN means in Spanish, Red de Activismo e Investigación por la Convivencia. In English, literally, it will means network of researchers and activists working toward the production of systematic knowledge and advocacy for human rights. So REACIN was born in a context where authoritarianism was getting deeper and our public universities were being cornered and financially strangled. And on the other hand, at the same time, mano dura policies or militarized policies were becoming the main public policy in the citizen security area. So some professors from different universities decided to gather to conform REACIN. And then in the face of these mano dura policies, we started to gather information from communities that were working toward building pacts between gangs and women in order to produce ceasefire pacts. So we found these experiences so important in order to show collective efficacy from communities that we luckily at that time we had some donors and partners such as Open Society Foundations that was also very important to develop our research. So we can say that we have developed partnerships between communities, other in the national level, other human rights organizations, but also digital media and also artists, because one of our unique identity traits is that we combine research with activism. So we want to disseminate our knowledge with other formats. So we are working also with artists. Then we collaborate with other Latin American organizations, such as, for instance, Igarapé Institute. We work in the monitor of lethal force of police abuse in Latin America with other organizations such as Fundación Ideas para la Paz in Colombia or CIDE in Mexico. And then also at the international level, and I will say more in the backstage scene, we have collaborated, for instance, with independent mission within the independent fact-finding mission of the United Nations to provide our findings concerning police brutality in the poor neighborhoods. And we are also working with Guernica Center for International Justice in order to make the systematic documentation when to be prepared when justice will be exercised in our country.
So very rich partnerships, and if I understood right, the three levels. So within your country, in the continent, on an issue of a common concern, like use of lethal force by state institutions, and then truly globally through UN to put the pressure on your government to stop abusing the rights. But what I want to focus now is to ask you about this first example you gave. And this is how it looks like, if you could bring it really like a picture to us, for academics to go to a downtown community and mediate, as you said, a ceasefire between community and gangs. And how was that also, how was trust built? How was the relationship established and maintained? And what were the consequences or reactions by police and other government authorities also heavily involved in this area?
Yes, well, we are our organization is mainly formed by sociologists, psychologists, and also we have a lawyer. So we are trained in ethnography and in being present in the communities. And I will say that concerning your question on the building of trust, it has been very important. I will say being present there. I mean, there is this continuous disposition to be there, and this will to build trust by being there, by being able to help and making bridges between people in urban poor communities and other organizations. So we went to this community when we heard about the ceasefire pact, and we wanted to systematize it and to disseminate the experience in contrast to the military operations that were driven by the government. So we have started this collaboration in 2009. So we have had a long history of collaboration and building of trust in these communities. Right now, we are working in another community that was really brutalized by the military operations that have taken place in our country between 2015 and 2017. Just to give you an idea, for instance, in Venezuela, more people were killed by the police than in Brazil. In Brazil, you have 200 million inhabitants. In Venezuela, we have 29 millions. And in 2016, 4,600 people were killed in the poor neighborhoods. So we are working right now. We are systematically documenting police brutality in these neighborhoods, and we are moving forward, thinking about justice and the search for truth. And we are not speaking publicly about transitional justice, but we have started to think about that conversation.
Transitional justice in a sense of day after,
Yes.
in a sense how to remedy all the injustice done so far. I'll have
Yes,
to
yes.
move to the next speaker, but just one last question for you. You described the complexity of Venezuelan situation, and I'm sure highlighting the brutality of police is not something that makes you popular with government. So how much the partnerships matter for you, your team staying safe and being able to do the work in such a context?
Yeah. Well, I will say that this is one of the most challenging capacities we have developed here in Venezuela, because we have become articulated and we have learned to mobilize when, for instance, a public official names one of us in a TV program or threatens. So we have already developed a certain procedures of getting together and starting to make in public campaigns, just to show that we are all aware and we are ready to move and denounce, and we have bridges with international organizations. So we are working really like a network that is ready to mobilize in case of a need.
Mhm. Thank you. So to conclude, your partnerships are key for getting a good evidence and arguments the government doesn't want to show, but they're based on you being present in a community beyond the projects, and also as a solidarity platforms needed to defend you in the cases of pressures and threats to your organization. I think this brings us close to Brazil. So I would like to ask Melina maybe to explain what kind of partnerships Igarape has in a country, and how do you manage them? Again, you also passed through different stages from being very successful and influential at the national level to becoming almost an enemy of a government.
Yes, Sonia, as you all know, we are facing a really challenging times in Brazil, and it has made us to change a little bit of our position, because Igarapé Institute, it's a think tank based on construct solutions and bridge and putting all different parts together so we can think in a more sustainable solution, constructions, and public policy. And when this government is started, we have to change a little bit, because they just face like kind of trying to shut down the civil society, especially those who were working in subjects that he considered no-go subjects, such as gun controls, as we work and we have developed a long trajectory doing this kind of things, but also to work to police, a more professionalized police, that it's not violent, that can work through the rule of law and all the efficiency of the police. So as the Igarapé Institute, we've been developing partnerships with different parts of society, not just the government, because we always contribute with government, trying and building some solutions, such as what we called ISPGEL, that is the jail reference system that the military police of Rio de Janeiro uses. This was a project that was constructed with Igarapé Institute, helping the government and the public sector to improve their methodology and to work through the efficiency. And when this government started, we start to see like shutting down all these doors and all this collaboration that is key to our mission, and it is key to who we are. So we have to change a little bit, but the partnerships that we have developed for the long time, not only with governments, but also with business sector and also with the civil society organizations, has been really key, so we can move forward and we can go through this really challenging times that we are facing in Brazil.
And if you can go back to the government, I mean, you are very influential and visible and were attacked by president. But I'm wondering, did that close all the doors, or you have some relationships still ongoing, and how do you manage them not to put at threat, at risk, either your team or possibly some officials that you might be cooperating with still?
Yeah, we are being really careful and doing this risk analysis in every project that we do, and depends on the subject. Sometimes officials are more willing to cooperate, And as you know, Brazil is a federation, so we have different levels. It's not that everything closes. We can continue to work with the state level, for example, and even the city level. We have different officials, and also the business sector. It has not to be always us doing things, but what we are doing is like bridging these coalitions, these bigger coalitions, so we can strengthen our position and to keep the dialogue open. It sometimes is not through us, but what we are trying to do, it's like bringing more people to the subjects that really matters, and to try to show what is happening, because what we are facing at Garapé and different institutions in Brazil, it's not well publicized. Those who are not in the positions that we are, maybe they don't know what is happening. So part of our work has been telling and showing how civil society organizations are operating in this really challenged environment that we are doing. So sometimes, like managing to keep the dialogue with different sectors, including civil servants, that has been under attack by the government, has been really key to do other things. And we use communication strategy really to show this and to put this in a more open and transparency position. So we've been managing to work with communication too, in a really key way, so we can show what is happening in this scenario.
Mm-hmm. I want to highlight what you mentioned, and I think last time I interviewed Veronica and also a colleague from West Africa, they all mentioned that even in the worst of authoritarian contexts, there are always some people that you can talk to, at least unofficially, and that it's important to keep these channels of communication and consultations ongoing, so that either you bring them on the right side or be able to actually do your work. But the last question I want to ask are actually two questions. One is about the communications that you mentioned. So Igarape has extraordinary track record in communicating complex data through visualization. But also what I would want to highlight is the partnerships you established to communicate controversial topics like gun control or drug policy. And what I've seen on your website, and maybe you can describe to our audience, is who you involved, who are the people that you bring in these coalitions to communicate on your behalf or together with you, that you educate and have as your spokesperson. And if you can give us an example of concrete campaign that you might have done in this partnership model.
All right, so let's discuss a little bit about the communications. One thing that we are trying to do all the time is like, how can we translate all the content and all the research that we develop to a more broad audience? Because sometimes we communicate among ourselves in a really hermetic way of doing things that people really don't understand. So translation is really important, and you use different tools. So one thing that you use is technology to show data in a more understandable way. So we have this, like the first project that we did about gun control, it was this globe that shows the transfer from guns from country to country, so people can understand better what's really happening in terms of the transference of guns among countries. So it's much easier and it's much usable, so people can really understand what is going on. So this is key for us in terms of what we do. Sometimes have these long reports with 50 pages, really technical, and we try to manage some video about 3 minutes, so we can translate the message, the key messages, to different audience, so people can really understand what are the findings, the key findings, and what we should do, like the call of action that we are doing to a broader audience. And in terms of this bringing different speakers for the causes that we are doing, for example, in the gun control, as you know, this president has really weakened all the gun control law that we have, and this has become a really difficult times in terms of public safety in Brazil. So what we did, it's like understanding and identifying some, for example, police officers who has the same ideas as we do, as they understand what the implications for the daily jobs, and bringing them to give their, their position to decision makers, for example. So it's not just something that happens in civil society, but in those peoples who are really working with the subject that people can trust, and even bringing ex-ministers of justice who worked with that. So we are trying to manage and to bring people for the debate from different backgrounds, from different expertise, so they can dialogue with different audiences. It's not just the way that we are saying, but sometimes even bringing more people so we are not targeted, because sometimes what is happening in the field that we have, we are being targeted, not just civil society organizations, but also journalists and so on. So we try to bridge and to set this really broad coalitions, so everyone can speak on behalf of the subject and the evidence that we are finding.
Thank you, Melina. I'll ask both you and Veronica maybe to share in a chat links to few of these examples that you were talking about, engaging artists to present your conversations with mothers of the victims of the violence, or bringing these coalitions together to address controversial issues like gun violence. Now I'll move to speak with Sean a bit. We will have also Marcel, of course, speaking, and I see a colleague from Nigeria, Chigorezim from Clean Foundation, has also joined us. I'll just ask her to be a bit patient. I would love to hear also about their work, and also encourage our audience that has grew in time to ask questions. This is really incredible group of people with me today, so use your opportunity. So Sean, you are working in an international network, which makes things even more complicated, on an issue which is sensitive in any country that's policing. It's a sovereign right. So why organizing an international network to work on a national issue like policing? And yeah, how do you approach it? What kind of partnerships matter the most for your sensitive work on civilian oversight of policing across Africa?
Yeah, thanks, Sonia. So it's a continental network. It is Africa focused, as the name says, African Policing Civilian Oversight Forum. And it is controversial in the sense that, as you say, it's policing, but it's also the business of civilian oversight of policing. And this is something that is rubs people up the wrong way in many instances. But it is an example of a partnership that has come together and sustained a presence and an engagement with the issue over 10 years, and has demonstrated a continental passion for democratic policing in Africa. So we've seen coming together in the early days a coalition of academics, civil society, police organizations, and oversight practitioners where they exist. So national human rights institutions, ombuds offices, and where there's been specialized policing oversight bodies, those specialized policing oversight bodies, with the business of advocating for civilian oversight over policing and sustaining this presence, relationship, and participation. And what this partnership has done is it's given the ability of the focal point, which is APCOP, which is the network, the opportunity, one, to engage across the continent at multiple levels on the continent, so from very local level to regional and continental level, and among the various stakeholders of civilian police oversight. So this is not a single entity. It's understood as oversight happening within the police, oversight happening external through state-established or constitutionally established mechanisms like ombuds offices, and through the courts and their scrutiny of police process, but also, very importantly, civil society and their demand on policing service. And so
Can
you've been
you
able
share an
to take all
example?
of those together.
Can you share an example of a work? I mean, I can do advertisement for you, but I prefer you to give an example of where this partnership mattered to do something concrete, new.
Well, I mean, it's happened at several levels. So, post 2007 election violence in Kenya, and a movement towards police reform, and a lot of engagement, a lot of investment of thinkers, bringing together people, convening around that to start influencing Kenyan police law and the establishment of what is now the Independent Policing Oversight Authority in Kenya. At an African Commission level, to start trying to articulate what are the standards that we want to hold ourselves to if we want to meet our charter obligations when it comes to things like policing protests or arrest or detention, and building those standards. And then inculcating within police organizations the importance of adhering to and measuring themselves against their own codes of conduct. So the development of a common standard of policing in East Africa, and working with police organizations to assess their progress towards this. And not only doing it with the police organizations, but doing it collaboratively with civil society. So the assessment becomes even the business of oversight. And so you can see an operation across all the facets, and where partnership is absolutely part of the DNA.
It's impressive. You said you translated or created standards for the Africa. You translated the general standards and created the one specific for Africa, and then worked also at the national level. But I'm wondering, these diverse sectors that you gather at, that you engage with, I'm sure there must be tensions. I don't know whether within the organization, but for sure in environment that you engage with, because places that you mentioned like Kenya are not the most free currently, and there are challenges. So how do you position yourself, and how do you manage within your organization, when you will, for example, act, and when your civil society member will be a key actor, and if there are diverse interests between, for example, national police representatives and civil society that are both represented in your organization or that you engage with.
Yeah, so there are some strategic considerations. The agenda is broad, so there's the hard end of the business of police oversight and holding someone to account, but there's also the standard setting, and there's the technical development of these organizations. A theme that runs through all of that is, why do we want police oversight? And to build a consensus around the importance that accountability and oversight has in desirable good policing, being in the interests of both civilians and of police officers, and of their effectiveness and efficiency at the end of the day. So we try and kind of coalesce around a common agenda before we go into the more contentious issues of how this is actually played out. What we found is that police organizations generally at senior leadership recognize the benefits, are eager to engage, and are professional in their approach. I mean, where it becomes difficult is the political considerations that get made, that undermine good professional policing along the way. Individuals within the organization that are maligned and are fearful of what these developments hold, and that just becomes part of a kind of a risk management strategy, and identifying who the spoilers are and how those are addressed. What has also been really important for us is this development on the continent, and a coherence on the continent around democratic values. And when you talk about policing and police reform, you can't really separate it from kind of the principles and the values of democracy. They go hand in hand when you look at rule of law and human rights protections. But this convergence on the continent around a democratic aspiration, and we've seen it filter through, one, the rights charter that we have, our security sector framework guidelines, and we've been able to leverage off the back of that to try and articulate it. Well, what does this mean in the day-to-day business of a police officer in this instance? And this is part of the ongoing APCOF project, is around implementation. So taking kind of continental standards, international obligations and treaty obligations, and trying to translate that into the business of a police officer and the business of the person that manages that police officer, so that they're working in a rights compliant way.
So if we understand right, in a way you set the standards and then work through apparently depoliticized approach through implementation, to getting the professionals on board, while at the same time you tackle quite sensitive topics. Maybe just to ask you, I know you have worked, you mentioned protest policing as quite sensitive area, and quite recently you worked on emergency powers during COVID, and also on decriminalizing poverty and petty crime associated with the groups marginalized. These are the issues that tackle the power to the head. So how do you use partnerships and approach these issues that actually want to take away power for those that are too powerful or powerful in a bad way?
It is also the scale and breadth of the partnership. So these aren't partnerships that locate in a single stakeholder or a single power base. And so if you look at the work that we've done around the decriminalization of petty offenses, it has leveraged off the power centers that exist within the African Commission on Human and People's Rights that realize the arbitrary and discriminatory nature of these laws. And it's leveraged off the African Court, which has produced advisory opinion. And what that has done is that you've seen the judiciary in several countries then galvanize around that and actually challenge and the police responses to many of these tactics against poverty and status. And so you've been able to use those power centers to move the agenda forward, where you've kind of taken the risk and said, well, I'm sure there are going to be police organizations that are not happy with this, but we'll get to them when we get to them. And what we have seen is, you've had laws of being a rogue and vagabond struck off the statutes, and you've seen the police then simply pick up on other equally arbitrary laws like idle and disorderly or loitering and use that for the same end. So it's an ongoing kind of tug and war to try and achieve those objectives. We've also found, last point, Sonia, is that our relationships with academia have also been incredibly important, because we've used the facility of knowledge building to engage in these conversations in a way that is less confrontational and less contentious. And we've been able to build very strong relationships with people in and outside of the police, in and outside of government, around issues where we can have these academic conversations, and which we found very successful.
Thank you for that. I actually wrote a blog on think tanks ages ago with a colleague of Goran Bubielski on the same point on how education could be used to make a change on security. But let me go back to Marcela, who first time I met, I asked whether she remembers Junta in Argentina. And she does. She was a young girl, but she has a memory. So how and why did Resdal decide to work across the borders on oversight of armed forces and how the partnerships mattered in the context of Latin America political legacy to address this issue.
Okay, thank you, Sonia. Good morning to everybody. Yes, actually, Resdal was born in 2001 as a combination of academics and practitioners that were working along the Latin American region on issues of democracy and the relationship of authoritarian practices and the role of the military, the role of the police, and they were willing to build up democratic institutions. So our experience is similar to what Sean was saying some minutes before. It's an organization that whose mission is to build up democratic institutions regarding security and defense. So I was thinking when I was listening to all of you that it also your partnerships depend also on your mission. And in our case, our mission is to build up these institutions, to collaborate with them. So we soon discovered that our partnerships should include not only the academia and practitioners and civil society organizations, but that we had to work alongside governments, particularly ministries, of course, ministries of security and of defense, but also ministries of foreign affairs, ministries of finance, which are mostly forgotten, but they are key actors in every country. So we started working with all of them. We also realized that parliaments were an important actor, that they could help us working on these issues. And of course, the military and the police themselves. As Sean said, we discovered throughout our activities that they are willing to collaborate. They are willing to work more than we thought, I would say. At first, you mentioned the Comparative Atlas on Defense. At first, we did it ourselves. But when the first edition came out, soon we received requests from governments and from the military in order to participate in the publication. So we have an approach that I would say it's like we have an approach from below. We establish lots of partnership with middle-level members of the military, the police, of ministries. And we also work on the high-level, let's say, ministers or vice ministers, you know. And we use the two levels all the time. And sometimes one of them fails and the other one works, because institutions are composed of people. And we shouldn't forget that, right? Sometimes, what you said before, sometimes you can find people who want to collaborate, even if the institution is not too willing to do that. And in a regional level, we also work always with an approach of a local-based approach. I mean, all of the projects are run by a secretary that is based now in Uruguay, but the people who is working in the projects is from the country. So we try that all the time, because we had experience in our own programs that sometimes those who are regional or international actors tend to come to events or to your programs and take the stage, you know, and that's not very well perceived. So as we suffer that, we know that we don't have to do that. And then, yeah.
I want to ask you, I know Resdal did a lot for training a kind of a new generation of researchers on defense. So you had this regional internship bringing people from different Latin American countries to stay in your secretariat and work on an atlas. And I was wondering how did you prepare them for the relationship with military? Because military is a very specific organization with its culture and rules. And so how do you build the common language, the common understanding between civilian academics and wannabe researchers, young researchers, and organizations so powerful as armed forces?
Yes, it's a key issue. We always try to, as you said, to form them at first in the issue itself, because the military or the police are particular kind of actors. So you need to understand how they are functioning, for instance. You need to understand their rules, their mentality. So that's a key component of, at first we start with that, and then we start working on practical issues. We found that a way of training young researchers was to involve them in products and make them actually work and realize which the problems are and how to communicate and so on. Let me tell you that in our experience, both the military and the police institutions are very keen to deal with young people. And maybe because in my case, I'm older and I have my own experiences with them in my history, my country, and so on. Sometimes I have some kind of, fear or, oh, I don't know if I have to say this or that, but young people don't have that kind of restraints, right? And sometimes that works a lot. So we have found that they are very good to relate to the military and the police. We had an experience, we had two major experiences related to a women peace and security program that we ran. One of them was related to the incorporation of women into the armed forces, and it was a very young team who was running that kind of activities, and we went to UN missions and so on, and they did a great job. They had a good communication, and the other one was participating as enumerators in a survey for military and police, both in Uruguay and in Mexico. That was last year and this year. So you need those young people, especially because in our view, civil society is under kind of a siege, at least in our region, as Veronica and Melina was saying, and in other regions as well. So it's under siege not only because of a key aspect, which is resources, but also because of the competition, the market labor competition. Mm-hmm. So you need to attract young people. You need to let them feel that belonging to an organization that is from civil society. You know, you need them to feel that they are building up a different kind of world. Mm-hmm. So if you don't provide them with the possibility of talking, for instance, to authorities or to the military, you are restraining them. You know, so you need promoting young people is not only making them author a paper, it's also making them relate to an official institution, talk to a minister. You know. So I think it's a very important part and a huge challenge for civil society right now. How do you incorporate new generations to these issues, which are really difficult, as Melina and Veronica was saying. It's difficult to work with this kind of institutions. So you need to empower young people. That's our view.
I want to ask audience that is with us, because we have 10 more minutes. If anyone has a question or a comment, I'm going to give also floor to Chigozirin from Clean Foundation from Nigeria. But if anyone else wants to join, just send a request to turn on camera and sound, and I'll include you. Just one sentence from Marcela. Besides the work in Latin America, you started the partnership, Global Partnership for Security and Defense. Why this global work? Why a new initiative?
Yeah, we started in 2017 to work on a global level, and that was mainly because people from other regions were requesting that. They were requesting the transmission of the Latin American experience, which is a very important experience, a positive experience in several regards. And so we started working on a global partnership that can deal and that can share the experiences, also providing Shigo was there in one of the activities in Liberia, and you, Sonia, as well. So I think that it's also very important to work on this global level. So this partnership is devoted to share these experiences and to provide also to provide a different kind of voice to the matter of security sector reform, which is kind of dominated by views that sometimes are not applying to our regions. But on that, I would add, Sonia, that it's very important the development of civil society and of young researchers, because we have seen in a global scale is how difficult it is for some regions to build up civil society organizations working on this. If we think that in Latin America or in Africa that's difficult, we have seen that in Asia or Middle East countries it's more difficult. There are very few organizations working on this, but there are lots of young people willing to appear on the stage. So this global partnership for security and peace is also intended to be a stage for them. And our products are mainly done nowadays by these young researchers that are looking for a stage to provide their voice.
Thank you, Marcela. I'll ask you to turn off your microphone because we have sound. So just to conclude, what you offer is a knowledge from Global South, and that has been by tears, life, and years, and sharing with those that have demand for it. Guzirim, can you just briefly say, maybe not about all the partnerships Clean Foundation has, but one group we haven't discussed is business community. Can you speak about business and security? Like, how do you engage in these topics? And is it different than working, for example, with national police institution and oversight institutions?
Yeah, hello, good afternoon, everyone. Warm greetings from the Clean headquarters here in Abuja, Nigeria. I bring you very warm greetings from our board of directors, management, and staff. So for Clean as an organization, Clean, C-L-E-E-N, is an acronym for Center for Law Enforcement Education in Nigeria. We've been in existence since 1998, and our mission basically is to promote public safety, security, and accessible justice. And our strategies are inclusive of empirical research, legislative advocacy, demonstration programs with government, civil society groups, and the private sector. Since existence, Clean Clean is actually a thought leader as far as policing and law enforcement is concerned in Nigeria. In fact, since established, Clean is the only organization that have been able to make headway in this area of work substantially, perhaps because of our strategy of operation. We actually operate from the supply side of justice and security sector. And what we do basically is actually to identify key institutional challenges that exist within the various actors and institutions that we work with. and we work with them to to respond to these challenges. So through capacity building, through training, retraining, and then through also production of strategies, and also review, and then rolling them out. And then we also work with all the leaderships. In fact, for 16 years, I've been with CLEAN. And throughout this duration, I can tell you authoritatively that we've worked with over 18 inspectors generals of police in Nigeria. And what we do basically is actually we sit down with them from the day or maybe the next day after their appointment to develop their blueprints. And their blueprints are developed also to ensure that it responds to emerging concerns within our space. Nigeria is a very difficult country. Events of the NSAS protest it actually exposed the rot in this country. And even as we speak and ahead of 2023, it remains an issue of concern in the context of police brutality, the killings of young persons, even mass burial of human beings, right violations is being the order of day with regards to policing. For us in CLEAN, for each of our interventions, we always start with researches. So we conduct exploratory perception, scoping, real-time evidence-based research work that supports what they do within these various institutions.
Sorry, because we have 3 more minutes for the panel. Just to ask you very briefly to say which kind of partnerships matter the most in your work, or any formula for partnerships you have.
Yeah, so the formula for partnerships that we have is relationship building. So we are very careful, and we really get involved fully. Diplomacy, okay, because we've worked with very difficult IGPs and police personnel, and even management staff that refuse to give us access. And so even on several occasions, they have blacklisted CLEAN for various releases of some of our research findings, that particularly those that borders on right violations. And somehow we were able to also rebuild the relationship, and also secured access to these various agencies. And also working closely with them to set priorities that I said earlier and rolling them out. We also ensure that we mobilize resources, financial resources that supports the various interventions that we and expertise that we bring to the table. Apart from that, also, I think
I have to ask everyone, because we are closing the panel. Okay. Maybe just one sentence on partnership management for democratic security. So anyone wants to start, but in really one sentence. See Melina smiling, so I'll tell you.
I would say that partnership is key to build to face these challenges, moments that we are facing. So it's really key to have a broad partnership and management in different sectors. So just keep this in mind.
Thank you.
Also to add that for very difficult institutions like what we have in this part of the country, when we release those research findings that are indicting, there is need for us to first seek the attention of those at the leadership level, at the management level, and present your research findings. What it does is it also helps you to continue to gain access into these institutions. But when you come out and you just run to the media to disseminate the findings, you shut your door. Okay, so it's something that we in CLEAN we have learned over time, because they have really blacklisted us on several occasions, And we somehow, because we believe in partnership and we can't do it from the outside without really getting fully inside.
So
And so
fair
we're able
warning.
to over time. Yes.
Yeah, fair warning before saying something difficult. Sean?
Yes, very important.
I'd agree with that. I mean, for us, we really take political credit for successes that we have. That is to the mandate holders and the protagonists within this arrangement, and to recognize the role as facilitators in those partnerships. They're critical, as mentioned. They expand your reach and they ensure the longevity of the intervention, because none of what we're doing is short term. It requires people that can sustain it over time.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Chigorizin, can I ask you please to turn off your microphone so that we don't have a silence? Thank you. Marcel? Just the microphone, not the camera, Marcel. Thank you.
Yes, I would add in an internal matter, I would say be there and be consistent in the management of the partnership, and provide the stage and avoid being the sole protagonist of the partnership. That would be my advice. Thank you.
Wow, thanks. And Veronica?
Well, I will add to what has been said that yes, it's a matter of time. And I will say also emotional engagement in the sense that you have to be ready to be there for the others. And but at the same time, it's so rich and rewarding, the exchange, that definitely I have found that even in an authoritarian context, I will say it is the only way to persist and going forward with the goals we have established. That is, that is human rights, respect, and peaceful coexistence.
Thank you.
Also,
Thank
you have to be very imaginative to finding little spaces just to have contact with some state officials that can bridge between civil organizations and the state, even in these very small paths.
I hope our panel was a small path to open this issue also for other colleagues. I thank all five of you and also to our audience that followed the discussion for this hour. And I hope we will be able to continue these discussions in the future. So thank you all very much.